My name's Adam, 34 years old, and up until last year, I thought I'd nailed the whole married life thing. I had a stable job, a decent house, no major debt, and a wife who used to light up whenever I walked into a room. Used to. Somewhere between the second year of marriage and that July afternoon, things shifted, and not in the dramatic way you'd expect. No fights, no slammed doors, just silence, apathy, and way too many passive little jabs that I kept brushing off. It was her idea to host the big annual barbecue at her parents' place this time. Her dad was recovering from surgery, so she said it'd make things easier if we all came to them. I agreed, of course. I always did. I loaded the car, packed the drinks, helped her carry all the prep over to her childhood home like some unpaid assistant, and set up half the backyard while she was inside catching up with her sister. That backyard was practically sacred ground to them. One of those spaces filled with old toys in the grass, rusty lawn chairs that somehow still held everyone's weight, and inside jokes I'd never fully be a part of. I didn't mind being the outsider at first. I figured it came with the territory of marrying into a tight-knit family. But it wore on me over time. The way her mom would smile too tightly when I spoke. How her brother, Jake, always started sentences with, "No offense," but then said something offensive anyway. Still, I kept my cool. For her. For the sake of not being that guy. That afternoon, the grill was blazing. Kids were running around with popsicles, and I was manning the burgers like some suburban soldier. I'd just flipped a third batch when Jake sauntered over with his drink, leaned against the cooler, and gave me this smirk that had high school bully turned failed startup bro written all over it. "You know," he said, just loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. We all figured she'd end up with someone more impressive. But hey, every girl's got that one settle guy. Guess that's you, huh? It hit like a slap. Not just the words, those I could have shrugged off, but the laughter that followed. His buddy, the cousin whose name I could never remember, actually laughed and clapped him on the back like it was the joke of the day. My eyes immediately went to my wife. She was just a few steps away, sipping lemonade and chatting with her mom and sister. She heard him. I know she did. But instead of saying anything, she looked over, met my eyes, and then just turned back to the conversation and said something about the corn on the cob being overcooked. She didn't defend me. She didn't even flinch. Something broke right then. Not loudly, not explosively, just quietly. Like when you realize a door you've been knocking on for years isn't locked. It's just been closed from the other side. I stood there, holding a spatula in one hand and a half-burned patty in the other, wondering how many little humiliations I'd let slide just to keep the peace. I didn't scream. I didn't storm off. I just smiled, raised my beer in Jake's direction, and said, "Then she won't mind if I unsettle things." He raised his eyebrows, confused, but I'd already turned around, tossed the spatula on the table, took one last glance at the wife I thought I knew, and walked inside. I packed up everything I brought in under 10 minutes. The bag, the car keys, my dignity. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even call anyone. I just turned on some old rock playlist from college, rolled the windows down, and let the wind remind me I could breathe without walking on eggshells. That night, I slept on the couch, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I didn't want to smell her perfume on the pillows. Didn't want to be in a room we decorated together. And the next morning, before the sun was even up, I was already browsing rentals and calling movers. The divorce didn't happen right away. At first, she acted confused. "What do you mean? You're moving out?" she said, standing in the doorway in her old pajama pants, eyes puffy from sleep. I told her I needed space. Told her that when her family laughed at me, and she let them, something inside me finally gave up. She rolled her eyes and muttered something about overreacting. Said Jake was just being Jake. "He jokes with everyone," she added, like I was the problem for not laughing. That's when I knew I was done, not just with the marriage, but with the illusion I'd been holding on to. Over the next few weeks, we played the awkward dance of sorting logistics. Who gets what? Where I'd stay? She offered the guest room like it was a favor. I declined. Moved into a small but decent apartment closer to my office. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And it didn't have Jake's voice echoing through it or her mother's judgment hanging in the air like incense. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was realizing how easy it was. I didn't tell many people at first. Just a couple of close friends, my older cousin in Seattle, and my coworker Rena, who, ironically, was the first to ask, "Why did you stay that long?" That question haunted me for weeks. I didn't have a good answer. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I thought love was supposed to hurt sometimes. Or maybe I just didn't want to admit that I'd built a life around someone who never really saw me as her equal. But things started changing fast. I lost weight. Not on purpose, just from the stress at first. Then I leaned into it. Started running in the mornings, signed up for a gym membership I'd been putting off since we got married. I even picked up painting again, something I hadn't done since college. My apartment slowly filled with canvases, most of them bad, but mine. I said yes to dinners, to trips, to things I'd always skipped because she wasn't interested. And then came her sister's wedding. Her name was Alina, my ex-wife's younger sister. The wild card of the family, if you listen to her mother talk long enough. She was the one who dyed her hair bright blue in college, got a tattoo without permission, and once ghosted a Thanksgiving dinner to backpack through Portugal. Compared to my ex, she was night and day. My ex followed rules. Alina broke them. So when I got the wedding invite, my first reaction was suspicion. I hadn't spoken to anyone in that family since the split, and as far as I knew, Alina was still close to her sister. But the envelope was handwritten, the RSVP card tucked in with a note. "Hey Adam, I know things got weird, but you were always kind to me, and I want you there. Come if you want. No pressure." That was it. No guilt. No expectation. Just an honest offer. I stared at that card for hours. Tossed it. Dug it out of the trash. And 3 weeks later, I showed up at the venue in a charcoal suit and the cleanest shave I'd had in a year. The venue was beautiful. One of those open-air coastal setups with string lights, white roses, and the ocean breeze flirting with every speech. I kept to myself at first. Found my seat. Avoided eye contact with anyone whose last name matched my ex's. I'd seen her from across the courtyard earlier. She looked surprised, then annoyed, then indifferent. She was there alone. I'd expected her new boyfriend to be clinging to her arm like a trophy. But nope, just her, in a coral dress, sipping wine and trying too hard to look unbothered. The ceremony was lovely. Alina looked radiant, and the guy she was marrying, Daniel, I think, was the kind of man who gave genuinely nervous vows, voice cracking with sincerity. The kind of man I hoped to be again one day. Someone who believed in the vows he was saying. Afterward, during the reception, I kept expecting awkwardness, but it never came. In fact, Alina made a point of walking over to me herself, barefoot, holding a slice of cake, still glowing from the ceremony. "I'm really glad you came," she said, her voice a mix of warmth and mischief. "You clean up nice. I barely recognized you." I smiled. "You look stunning. And happy. That's more important." We talked a bit. Nothing deep, just old stories, shared glances at mutual ridiculous relatives, light banter. But there was something about the way she looked at me. Like I wasn't the ghost of a failed marriage, but a real person. I wasn't sure what to do with that feeling, so I just sat with it. Then came the toasts. There were a few. The best man, the maid of honor, even a sweet but rambling one from the groom's uncle. But the one that silenced the room came from Alina. She stood at the mic, glass raised, and began with the usual. "Thank you all for coming. Thank you to my wonderful husband, our families, our friends." And then she paused. Looked directly at me. Everyone turned to follow her gaze. "And I want to make a special toast," she continued, "to someone who showed up tonight despite having every reason not to. Adam, thank you for always treating me like a person, not a problem. For being kind when others weren't. For showing me what quiet strength looks like. You may not be part of the family anymore, but you'll always be part of mine." You could have heard a pin drop. I glanced over at my ex. She was frozen, mid-sip, her eyes darting between Alina and me like someone just unplugged her reality. Her mother looked scandalized. Her father whispered something sharp under his breath. But Alina didn't care. She smiled, raised her glass again, and said, "To Adam, for choosing himself, and reminding the rest of us we can too." The crowd clapped. Some hesitantly, some with genuine warmth. I just sat there, stunned, the rim of my glass still resting on my lower lip. Later that night, as people started dancing and drifting toward the open bar, my ex finally approached me. Her heels clicked across the stone patio like an approaching threat. "That was dramatic," she said, eyes tight. "I didn't know she was going to do that." I replied honestly. "She always liked you too much," she muttered. "Even when we were together. I guess now she doesn't have to pretend otherwise." I said, not unkindly, but with a calm finality that clearly got under her skin. She looked like she wanted to say more, like she had a whole speech prepared. But in the end, all she did was scoff, turn around, and walk away. I didn't follow. Alina found me again about 30 minutes later near the exit. She handed me a slice of cake box to go and said, "You don't have to stay if you don't want to. But if you do, there's an extra seat at the head table now. No pressure." I stayed, not because I wanted revenge, not to twist the knife, but because for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone genuinely wanted me there. Not out of obligation, not because I made their life easier, but because they saw me. I didn't plan to stay long. I figured I'd eat the cake, politely clap through the first dance, maybe duck out before people got too drunk and the awkward family energy turned sour. But when Alina offered me that seat at the head table, right beside her, no less, I didn't hesitate. I took it. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sitting somewhere off to the side, out of frame, out of focus. I was part of the moment. The people at the table welcomed me without a second thought. No sideways glances. No, weren't you the guy who? Just genuine conversation, laughter, and clinking glasses. And Alina, she made a point of pulling me into everything. Introducing me to friends I hadn't met, asking for my input on the playlist, even dragging me into the group photo by the ocean. I watched her dance with her husband later, the way she looked at him, and something inside me twisted, but not out of jealousy. Out of hope. Maybe that kind of connection wasn't dead after all. Maybe I hadn't missed my shot. Maybe I'd just given it to the wrong person. The night wore on. The music got louder, and more than one relative gave me a weird glance as the wine kept flowing. Her cousin Mark, the same one who'd laughed at Jake's barbecue jab, even stumbled over at one point and slurred, "Didn't think we'd ever see you at another family thing." He snorted, like he expected me to laugh along. I didn't. Instead, I leaned in and calmly said, "Yeah, well, some of us grow up. Others just grow bitter." That shut him up. He walked away blinking like he'd been slapped. I thought that'd be the most tense moment of the night, but I was wrong. Because just before the DJ queued up the last slow dance set, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned, and there she was. My ex. She stood there in her heels and that coral dress, eyes glassy, lips pressed together like she'd rehearsed this 100 times and still didn't know how to start. "Can we talk?" she asked. I considered saying no. I really did. But some part of me, the part that still craved closure, nodded. We walked a little ways down the beach, the music fading behind us, just the sound of the waves and our footsteps. She hugged her arms around herself like she was cold, though the night air was warm. "I didn't expect you to come," she said quietly. "I almost didn't," I replied. She hesitated, then sighed. "Jake was out of line that day. I should have said something." I looked at her, waited. That wasn't an apology. That was commentary. "I just didn't want to cause a scene in front of my family," she added quickly. "You know how they are." I nodded. "Yeah, I do." There was silence between us, the kind that feels more like weight than air. "I didn't think you'd actually leave," she admitted, voice cracking just a bit. "I thought you were just being dramatic. I thought you'd care that I was hurt," I said. Turns out, we were both wrong. That hit her. I saw it in her eyes. That flicker of realization, of guilt maybe, or just the loss finally registering. She looked out at the water. "Are you seeing someone?" I didn't answer right away, because technically, no, but something was shifting with Alina, and we both knew it, even if it hadn't been spoken yet. "I'm seeing things differently now," I said carefully. "I'm seeing myself differently." She gave a sad little laugh, almost self-deprecating. "Alina always did like you. She respects people who respect her back," I said flatly. "That used to include you." That was the last thing I said before turning around and walking away. I didn't look back. When I got back to the venue, most people were either dancing or saying their goodbyes. I found Alina by the gift table, barefoot again, holding a pair of champagne flutes. She saw me, smiled like I was the only person in the room. "Everything okay?" she asked. I nodded. "It is now." She held out one of the glasses and clinked it gently against mine. "To unsettling things." I smiled. "To choosing peace." We didn't say anything else. Just stood there under the fairy lights, watching the last guest drift out, the soft music playing behind us. She didn't press. She didn't ask what my ex had said. She didn't need to. Something between us had shifted. Not fast, not flashy, but real. And just when I thought the night was over, Alina leaned a little closer and said, almost teasingly, "You know, this dress doesn't have pockets, and I've got a room upstairs with no keycard." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that your way of asking for help?" She grinned. "It's my way of saying I trust you." And that was the beginning of something I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, I woke up before the sun had fully risen, wrapped in crisp hotel sheets and silence. Alina was still asleep beside me, one arm draped across my chest, her hair tangled on the pillow. There was a peace in that moment I hadn't felt in years. No expectations, no tiptoeing, just calm. And something deeper, respect, maybe, were the beginnings of something more than that. I carefully slid out of bed, not wanting to wake her, and stepped onto the small balcony attached to the suite. The ocean was calm, a soft breeze brushing the linen curtains behind me. I stared out at the water for a long time, sipping leftover champagne straight from the bottle like some cliché movie ending. Except this wasn't an ending. It was a new start. The fallout, though, that didn't wait long. Within 48 hours, word spread like wildfire through my ex-wife's family. Apparently, someone had spotted me and Alina walking out of the hotel suite together the next morning. Alina in her husband's oversized blazer and me carrying her heels. Subtle, we were not. The text came first. From my ex. "You're unbelievable." Then her mom. "You have no shame." Even Jake decided to chime in. "Bro, Alina?" Seriously, I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't know them my silence anymore, but I didn't know them my energy either. They'd show me who they were. I was just showing them I could walk away and stay gone. Alina, on the other hand, was calm through it all. She called her sister the day after the wedding, not to fight, but to make it clear, her life was her own. If she wanted to spend time with me, that was her decision. "If your biggest problem is that I'm hanging out with someone who treats me well," she said, "then maybe you should ask yourself why that bothers you so much." That ended the conversation. For months after that, things were quiet. My ex blocked me, then unblocked me, then blocked me again. I ignored it. I was busy. Alina and I started spending more time together. Not in some flashy rebound way, but in the kind of way where she'd fall asleep on my couch with pain in her hair, or we'd spend a Saturday just fixing up my place and laughing about nothing. She made my life feel like mine again. And then, a funny thing happened. Alina got pregnant. It wasn't planned. We weren't even sure how to tell people at first. But when she found out, she didn't panic. She sat me down, took a deep breath, and said, "I know this is fast, and I know it's complicated, but I'm not scared. Are you?" I wasn't. Not even a little. We moved in together after that. Not because of the baby, but because it felt right. She brought light and color into my apartment, literally. She turned my boring gray living room into a mix of pastel chaos and hand-painted furniture. She even repurposed one of my old canvases into a wall piece for the nursery. But the real revenge? That came a few months later. It was Thanksgiving. My first one without my ex or her family. I had no intention of going anywhere near them. But Alina's mom, surprisingly, extended an invite. Said she wanted to make peace, wanted to celebrate the new chapter. I didn't trust it, but Alina said she wanted to go, to show them that she wasn't ashamed of her life. So we went. I walked in holding her hand, our baby bump already showing beneath her sweater. The room went dead silent. Jake did a double take. My ex looked like she'd just swallowed glass. Her mother gave one of those brittle smiles people give right before they say something awful. "Well," she said, eyes scanning us. "I hope you know what you're doing, Alina." "I do," she said simply, and squeezed my hand. We sat at the end of the table. They'd clearly left us the worst seats, too close to the kitchen, too far from the action. But we didn't care. We were our own team now. The meal started out awkward. Tense conversation, lots of cleared throats, and forced laughter. And then my ex decided she just couldn't help herself. "So, Adam," she said, cutting into her turkey a little too aggressively. "What's it like going from married to babysitting the younger sister?" Alina's fork hit her plate. Gently, but deliberately. She looked her sister dead in the eye. "Better than being married to someone who let her family humiliate him while she watched," she said. The table froze. Then her father, a usually quiet man who rarely spoke unless spoken to, chuckled. Just once. Dry, amused. "Well," he said, raising his glass, "she's not wrong." I nearly spit out my water. Alina's mother shot him a look of pure venom, but he just shrugged. "What?" he said. At least he showed up. At least he stood for something. The rest of you? You always tiptoed around Jake and his stupid jokes because it was easier than dealing with the truth. Jake made a noise of protest, but Alina's dad shut him down with a look. Then he turned to me. You've changed, he said. Good for you. The room stayed awkward after that, but the power dynamic had flipped. Alina and I weren't there to beg for acceptance. We were the ones holding the cards now. We'd built something real out of the ruins, and it showed. We left before dessert. Alina said she'd had enough sugar for one day. That night, back at home, she curled up next to me on the couch and whispered, You know, if we have a boy, I want to name him after your grandfather. The one you told me about. The one who raised you to be kind even when people didn't deserve it. I didn't say anything at first. I just held her. Because in the end, the real revenge wasn't the toast at the wedding. It wasn't walking out of that barbecue or watching my ex squirm in her seat. It wasn't even the shocked silence when we showed up together, happy and whole. The real revenge was peace. The real revenge was becoming someone I could be proud of again. And as for Jake, he tried calling me once, months later. Said he needed help getting a job where I worked. I didn't answer. I just sent him a copy of the employee handbook and wished him luck. As for my ex, the last I heard, she was dating someone new. A guy who looked good in photos but, according to Alina, had the personality of dry toast. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel smug. I just hoped she found whatever she was looking for, because I finally had. The baby came that spring. A boy. We named him Ellis, after my grandfather. When we brought him home, Alina looked at me, exhausted and glowing, and said, Remember when you thought you were the guy she settled for? I smiled. Turns out I was the guy someone else was waiting for. And in that quiet nursery, with the sound of soft breathing and new beginnings, I finally understood. You don't have to scream to make a statement. Sometimes, you just have to leave and build something better. Something they can never take credit for. Something they'll never be invited to. Something that wasn't built out of obligation or fear, but out of love, earned and chosen. That's the best kind of revenge. And I took every second of it with a smile. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.